Hey, how's it going, everybody? Just wanted to get on and do a little live stream. This is actually the first time that I've ever done something like this, but to kind of give myself, it looks like a little bit of therapy in regards to the recent Steelers loss. I just played the Baltimore Ravens yesterday, January 12th, and lost to them 28 to 14 in the wild card playoff game. Just kind of quickly looking back at some of the stats from that. Baltimore, you're looking at pass yards of 165, 299 yards rushing, a total of 464 yards. In the Steelers, you had 251 pass yards, 29 yards rushing, and 280 yards total. So obviously just frustrating off the top from those stats, but things that stick out, those rush yards, I mean, 299 for Baltimore was absolutely torture to watch. So I also want to preface this, as I know I said this is my first video that I've ever even done something like this, but just need to get some feelings out of me. I have no background in football. Please do not take anything that I say outside of just purely being a fan for many years is just where all this is coming from. I totally understand there's going to be a lot more people that know a lot more than me, but these are just kind of some of my feelings and thoughts from the game. But I know that we had that game a few years back where we couldn't stop any of the run versus Minnesota. You had people like Joe Green coming out, right, and talking about what an embarrassment our run defense is. And I think, unfortunately, that's just still where we're at with, $100 million defense. We sunk money into this defense. That's where all of it's going. And I'm just not seeing it. I understand, the offense keeping them out there, but the defense, I mean, couldn't do anything. It felt like they even start the game last night. So just really tough to watch on both sides of the ball. Not sure about anybody else, but with all the slow starts, I understand the thought process of wanting to receive the ball. But as a team like Baltimore, would probably love to get a second chance of getting that ball at the second half, and also think that probably could have went a long way for us, but ultimately don't think that something like that would have ended up changing much of this game, to be honest with you. But right out of the gate, I mean, just disappointing for where we were. Just making the coin toss call, receiving the ball again. I can see the thought process behind it, but it wasn't something that I would have done myself. But with that, I mean, we're back to where we are. It seems like every year the past 8 years. And it's getting old. It's getting very frustrating. I know that this fan base has a lot of expectations. It's a lot different than other fan bases, but it just feels like we're turning into one of those bottom feeders. And that sucks. Before the season, I was one of those people like, hey, we got Lamar's number. We have a plan for him, right? I think that eventually, grows stale, right? As much as we have known them for what he's even been in the league now, 7 years. As much as we know them, they're going to pick up things on us. And it looks like they, through this year, just through these 3 games, changed things schematically way more than we had, or at least were more fluid in doing so. You had people like James Harrison during the game last night tweeting out, why aren't we stopping the option, right? They just kept running it. It was absolutely torture to watch the first half. And was honestly one of those things where I'm sitting there like, man, the best thing that we could probably do is not make a game of this, right? Just let it be as bad as it can be, because as we've known in the fan base, right, the national media, you feel like doesn't understand the Tomlin situation, and kind of let me focus on that because that is part of what I want to talk about. I have been a Tomlin supporter this whole time. I never really understood how you could not be. It was always that question, right? If you don't have Tomlin, who are you going to go get? I do think the message has grown stale, right? I mean, his longest losing streak, I believe, 5-game losing streak, the Steelers' longest drought without a playoff win, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, what more do you really need to see? And I think just the tough part for everybody over, since the game ended is just knowing, with the Rooneys and the ownership team, that's not something that's likely to happen. They're not going to probably be moving off of him. He has a no trade clause. He just signed a deal for 3 more years, an extension. So you just feel like you're getting caught in this wheel of mediocrity. And I do believe, and I know this has been said on a lot of places, but just that mediocrity is worse than bottoming out. I think it was Colin Cowherd that I had heard say that in a video. Not that I love a lot of the stuff that he says about the Steelers, but sometimes you got to bottom out to get a little bit better. But we're just staying in that middle tier. And sometimes if it doesn't hurt bad enough and things are okay, you're just going to kind of sit there. But I think we have to look at a lot of things with this team. I think there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. There are great players on this team. I mean, you can't take away what TJ Watt has done for this franchise, how good of a player he is, how dynamic he is, but he didn't do a lot last night. I know he was responsible for the running backs, but at what point, do you, and this is where I come in as not a football guy, but at what point do you recognize that, go off that assignment, or from the coaching staff, do you move that, right? It felt like there's nothing that was happening the first half, and not, it got a little bit better the second half, but at that point they'd already won the game. They're going to run the ball. They're going to run the clock down. Steelers try to claw back into it. And I think I don't know whatever about everybody else, but one of the things I'm dreading is having to listen to, well, we did climb back into it, right? They made a game of it. They were close. So yeah, just a lot to unpack. As I've gotten older, you enjoy the off seasons more than, you do previously with the moves that happen and stuff like that. But, when you don't know what's going to be happening this year, if they are going to be making any changes, or if we're just going to be, definition of insanity, it gets tough. It definitely gets tough. And don't want to age myself, but will here. I didn't grow up with the 70s Steelers, but I did grow up with the 2000s Steelers, right? That were competitive. And, I think a franchise that deserved respect. I don't see that right now. I do feel like we are, kind of a joke, lacking stuff in the NFL. I think it was Chris Sims who said it in one of his, videos is, it's kind of boring watching the Steelers just make the playoffs every year and take up one of these spots that like another team could have. And he's totally right. This is embarrassing. Everybody was up in arms about the spread. How could we have the spread? Every game's, a 3-point game. But it turned out to be true, right? A lot of people were down on the fans, down on the city for feeling like, hey, they're not, going into this game with any hope, any support. You're in the playoffs against a rival. Why aren't you having any fun? So that's why, wanted to stay positive about it, but almost, happy didn't get our hopes up at this point. But lots to do. And with all this, still saying always going to be here, always going to be a fan of the black and gold, all that good stuff. But it's definitely feels like a time that we need some changes. It's been consistently like this. I think we're at 8-9 years now. Without a playoff win, what does it have to take? How many years do you need to get to? How much more of this do you need to see? And there's just so many questions. The offense is young, and I think you have a lot of openness with what could happen there based off the players that won't be returning or that are free agents, things of that nature. But the defense you've invested so much in, and I know I've just taken this from everything that I've been watching this morning, but I think the conversation is very real of what pieces do you move on from? Is Minka a real piece that you'd want to move on from? Is, Cam, I don't think so with his age. Alex Highsmith, that's always been a conversation. Nick Herbig, could you get something from him? TJ Watt, as much as it sounds like blasphemy, even putting that in a sentence. I don't know. He didn't do a whole lot last night, and I don't think that's indicative of his whole career or what he is. But he'll be going into year 9 coming up. I mean, it's just time's flying by. And I really think that we're not even at the point that we need to rebuild here, but we gotta restart. And I think the conversation was after Ben left, right? The Steelers were able to avoid that rebuild, right? Retool a few things, maybe draft a quarterback, things of that nature, but ultimately it just hasn't panned out. And I'll be honest, 5 weeks ago, I was riding pretty high, right? With the wins, seeing where we were at, all those good things. I mean, how could you not? But when you show week after week for five weeks in a row, against good teams and the Bengals, but honestly, I think they're better than us at this point easily. I mean, you've shown who you are. So moves need to be made. This is literally just me getting some of my frustrations out, my venting. Please do not take any of what I say with any any intention because I do not know what I'm talking about. I am just a fan who's a little bit frustrated. But with that, I just want to thank anybody that does watch this. Feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions, and we'll get this off season underway. See what changes are made, and hopefully not making my second video on January 13th of 2026. But we'll see. Have a good one.